in American spy satellites. He flicked a switch and glanced at the display. A few birds appeared as tiny pinpricks of red. There were more dots pulsating in the swamp, crocodiles, or perhaps manatees. And a single dot, about 20 meters from the runway. He turned to speak to the man called Carlo, but there was no need. Carlo was already leaning over his shoulder, staring at the screen. Carlo nodded. There was only one man waiting for them, as agreed. Anyone hiding within a few hundred meters of the airstrip would have shown up. It was safe to land. The pilot looked out of the window, and there was the runway. It was a rough strip of land on the edge of the coast, hacked out of the jungle and running parallel with the sea. The pilot would have missed it altogether in the dying light, but for the 2 lines of electric bulbs burning at ground level, outlining the path for the plane. The Cessna swooped out of the sky. At the last minute, it was buffeted about by a sudden damp squall that had been sent to try the pilot's nerve. The pilot didn't blink, and a moment later the wheels hit the ground and the plane was bouncing and shuddering along, dead center between the 2 rows of lights. He was grateful they were there. The mangroves, thick bushes half floating on pools of stagnant water, came almost to the edge of the runway. Go even a couple of meters in the wrong direction and a wheel might snag. It would be enough to destroy the plane. The pilot flicked switches, the engine died, and the twin-bladed propellers slowed down and came to a halt. He looked out of the window. There was a jeep parked next to one of the buildings, and it was here that the single man, the red dot on his screen, was waiting. He turned to his passengers. "He's there." The older of the 2 men nodded. Carlo was about 30 years old, with black curly hair. He hadn't shaved. Stubble, the colour of cigarette ash, clung to his jaw. He turned to the other passenger. "Mark, are you ready?" The man who called himself Mark could have been Carlo's younger brother. He was barely 25, and although he was trying not to show it, he was scared. There was sweat on the side of his face, glowing green as it caught the light from the control panel. He reached behind him and took out a gun, a German-built 10mm Glock automatic. He checked it was loaded, then slipped it into the waistband at the back of his trousers under his shirt. "I'm ready," he said. "There's only him, and there are 2 of us." Carlo tried to reassure Mark, or perhaps he was trying to reassure himself. "We are both armed. There is nothing he can do." "Then let's go." Carlo turned to the pilot. "Have the plane ready," he commanded. "When we walk back, I will give you a sign." He raised a hand, one finger and thumb forming an O. "That is the signal that our business has been successfully concluded. Start the engine at that time. We don't want to stay here 1 second longer than we have to." They got out of the plane. There was a thin layer of gravel on the runway which crunched beneath their combat boots as they walked round the side to the cargo door. They could feel the sullen heat in the air, the heaviness of the night sky. The island seemed to be holding its breath. Carlo reached up and opened a door. In the back of the plane was a black container about 1 meter by 2. With difficulty, he and Mark lowered it to the ground. The younger man looked up. The lights on the landing strip dazzled him, but he could just make out a figure standing still as a statue beside the jeep, waiting for them to approach. He hadn't moved since the plane had landed. "Why doesn't he come to us?" he asked. Carlo spat and said nothing. There were 2 handles, one on either side of the container. The 2 men carried it between them, walking awkwardly, bending over their load. It took them a long time to reach the jeep, but at last they were there. For a second time, they set the box down. Carlo straightened up, rubbing his palms on the side of his jeans. "Good evening, General," he said. He was speaking in English. This was not his native language, nor was it the General's, but it was the only language they had in common. "Good evening." The General did not bother with names that he knew would be false anyway.